advocate with it before,
Yeah. Thank you.
obviously, right? Cool, yeah.
Thank you.
So you're writing a 30,000 word paper, you said?
Paper. And it was actually fun because I did research on fan fiction and
Wow.
like queerness and gender and sexuality. So it was kind of fun. Also great to have, like I did it on K-pop fan fiction specifically.
Wow.
And like I love, academia paying coins for me to like relive my 16-year-old dreams. It's fine.
Right.
And then I graduated. And then starting from September, I would say, I've started like actively looking for work. And it was really hard because I think with anthropology, you get a lot of research experience, but I think professional experience you don't get. Like you're just kind of in classes all the time writing papers.
But I mean, so sorry to cut you off there. Like,
no.
I found that like people in academic backgrounds, like it comes really natural to you, like how to do research, right? Like the different methods. Like I just remember, and this is like I have a very limited experience of actual academic research. Like the only academic research I remember being in was like in chemistry classes in like grade 10, 11, right? And like there's a lot of like, okay, setting up your hypothesis, setting up a research design, like all of those things that come super naturally to you that become very important for UX researchers, and not a lot of people know how to do. It's just like transitioning those skills into like rebranding it, I guess. In some way, right? So yeah. So I'm curious, like specifically for that like K-pop queerness, what was it specifically about? But I mean, what was the research question about? I'm curious, like just to get it right.
So essentially, my research question was, how are these fan fiction communities? Like I kind of introduced myself as someone who grew up on the internet, like on memes, online communities. And I think I understood like my sexuality and my queerness and my gender identity through membership and participation through these communities. And people would write fan fiction of different kinds of members, and specifically a lot of male like gay fan fiction is very common specifically. And what kind of puzzled me was, why are women interested in writing like fan fiction about gay men? Like what is the tie there? Like what is the why are people getting getting excited about this? Like why there's like a cult like following in different kinds of pairings when it comes to K-pop, like especially BTS. That's what I wrote my
nice.
that's what I wrote my thesis on. And I was just curious. I was like, how are these people, why are they writing it? How are they writing it? And then I discovered that there's actually a lot of like fan fiction research on this, and psychological research, in the sense that women write about gay men and gay male pairings because they get to kind of view these pairings as, like traditionally in media, women are so objectified, and they're always sort of the object of desire, instead of men being the object of desire. And so they got to kind of experiment with how they would themselves fantasize about sexuality and being in a romantic sexual relationship, what have you, but in a way that was very distant, in a way that like they had total control over, what they wanted to explore, because they weren't the ones who were doing it. Like they weren't the ones who were in these relationships. It was completely different people, and it was a different gender of people as well. And there's also another aspect of power, which is a lot of the times in media, you see men being behind the camera, behind the script, behind everything that women are doing, and they felt powerless in the ways that media and mainstream media kind of portrayed women. And so this was their chance to kind of reclaim that. And they're like, well, now we're the ones writing about men, and we're the ones who are in control, and we write the script. So that was kind of empowering. And I also explored how now with millennials and Gen Z, like a lot of folks get into fan fiction because they want to meet other queer people. Like it was like a running joke in a lot of my groups of friends, where it's like, if you're like, it was very hard to find like straight people in fan fiction. Most people were queer because that was the way you meet other queer people all over the world. Maybe you're living in an area where there's not a lot of queer people locally. And so this was your chance to meet someone who was queer, but like maybe many countries away or in a different city or in another place in the globe. So that was kind of exciting because I remember coming out. I came out a very long time ago. I came out when I was 18. I'm 25 now. But I first came out to actually my online friends before I came out to anyone else. And that was really important because these people kind of made it and normalized the aspect of queerness. And they were like, yeah, you know, that's fine. Like, that's completely fine that like you like women or like you like this, you like that. And so I think my interest in building this research was to sort of voice what the community was saying and what they were getting out of fan fiction, which is that unfortunately in mainstream media, even to this day, we don't have a lot of different kinds of representation. I mean, you see gay men, you see lesbians, but there's not a lot of bisexual people. There's not a lot of asexual people. There's not a lot of pansexual, polyamorous. There's not diversity within queerness that you can actually find in fan fiction. And that's what you know people want. They want to see different kinds of people be in media. And fan fiction was there to deliver.
Yeah, just to mention as well before we can continue on the conversation. If I ever interrupt you, it's just because I'm excited. I don't mean to like interrupt you at all.
Of course.
Like there's so many things that you mentioned. The first thing that comes to mind immediately is, have you heard of Wattpad? Do you know the company Wattpad? Yeah. I feel like you'd be a really good fit for that company. They're hiring for a UX researcher role.
They have an office in Toronto, right?
Yeah, they have an office in Toronto.
Yeah.
And one of my friends who's living with me right now actually works on their team. I think they're hiring for a user researcher. I don't know if the role is still open. But you'd be a really good company.
Let me know. Let me know about that.
Yeah. I'll connect you in an email. That's number one, because you're speaking on fan fiction, and that's like a platform for a lot of fanfic writing. That's number one. Number two, you mentioned how fanfic is a way to, well, let me just you mentioned a lot of things. One thing that I really connected to my early ex. I noticed that she enjoyed fanfic. It seems like because it was a way, and this is my observation, so let me know what you think is right. It's a way. It's because it seems like it's a more EQ, like a strong EQ community. You know, I noticed that it was like a much more emotionally connected, kind of like way to think about life and think about the world. And when I saw her write fanfic or saw her read, I'm like, this is like, it seems like it's therapeutic in some way. I never really got to involve myself directly or understand directly, but I'm always curious about the fanfic community and what it's all like. But yeah, it seems like just to kind of wrap up that thought, it seems like it's just more high EQ. It's it's a higher EQ community, really in some ways, right? And it's it's kind of like a daydreaming space in some way too.
It is.
And you mentioned that the queer community connects a lot with other people online. That's another completely different rabbit hole of conversation, right? But that's an interesting idea too, how new communities are forming now in the world. I think a lot about information diets and how we're becoming more socialized. How socialization these days is less based on traditional, I guess, institutions like religion or state. It's more based on how information travels through the world, and the platforms like Wattpad socialize people and brings community together. Anyway, let me just stop there. So what types of what do you imagine your transition into UX being like? What are you currently thinking about looking at right now in terms of UX work, UXR work?
Yeah, I think I was excited about it because I like the aspect of it. Because, one of the things that I struggled with during writing my master's, and then the pandemic happening, and then with the racial conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and then having the anti-Asian hate crime rise, I think one of the biggest issues and almost like an identity crisis that I had was I'm going into this PhD thing that I'm starting in September, and it's probably going to take me like 4 or 5 years to get my dissertation work out. And then what? Like, what do I do in the meantime in like 5 years of just me? Like, I don't want to, I guess, what is the word? Like, I don't want to stereotype and like limit research because it's very important work. I mean, I'm doing research. It's something I'm very passionate about, but I think it's just not, like, okay, I'm working in a project. What is the actual change? And I think that UX research kind of inspired me in that way, where you actually get to work with a team and then you are researching and then you develop a product or like an experience or something like that. And then you actually get to see the fruits of your labor be in a professional space or have access to public. One of the things with academia is that unless you have friends who are in academia or you're an academic yourself, it's very difficult to access academia at times, especially with the language barrier. I mean, some of these articles that I have access to is because U of T is paying like thousands of dollars in membership fees so that I can have access to the information. But it's not so publicly accessible. And like, education already and academia already is such a privileged space for no reason. And I very much disagree with this because I think everyone deserves to know and have a space where they can safely learn about certain things and their rights and, stuff like that. But I think it's just very inaccessible. I think it's just, so many years I've spent talking about academia, and it's only because I just talk about it constantly that my friends are like, okay, I know what you're talking about. But if it wasn't for me delivering this news, like how else would they be aware of like all of the research that's going on? Like an example is right now I'm doing research. I'm a qualitative research assistant for this multidisciplinary research. It's called Queer COVID Toronto. And we are interviewing queer people and collecting data to kind of explore how COVID-19 impacted the queer community here in the city. And it's great. I'm doing interview work. I'm analyzing data. I'm meeting with my team and whatnot. But it's going to take me at least 2 to 3 years for that data to be published. And then when it's published, it's not so publicly accessible because you have to pay a certain fee to read these articles that are going to be probably published in a journal. And I'm just like, it feels very empowering whenever I hear other people's stories. Like I spoke to, a trans therapist the other day, and then I spoke to a non-binary person who was in journalism, and like I learned so much from them, but I'm not able to see like how that will change. But I feel like with UX research, like it's gonna give me professional experience, which I really need. I think every academic really needs some sort of professional experience. But secondly, you can kind of see the fruits of your labor a little bit earlier.
Yeah. The really good news on the first point that you mentioned about academia being inaccessible. Generally speaking, I guess the silver lining here is that UX research needs a lot of the industry seems to prefer a lot of people with academic experience and credentials. Like I'm finding that I can't really grow too much in the space because I don't actually have that academic experience. Like a lot of jobs, for example, if you want to work at the big tech companies, they require PhD.
Wow.
They're actually the biggest, the biggest companies will require PhD. At least you're at least a candidate, like you're becoming a candidate, and that's actually uncommon in the world of product, which is what you'd be working with, right? It's the product team manages UX, and UX includes UX research, and so most product roles don't require such like advanced credentials, but I found that UX research is like prefers a lot of anthropology candidates, and so it's like a really good fit actually. And Facebook, I don't know what your moral standards kind of like around companies like Facebook are. I'm kind of like but like those companies require definitely like all of their descriptions require candidacy, and I agree to the point of that. Like just on a very general level, like we have academic interest and philosophical interest, but it's also really nice to get in front of people and see how your research directly impacts people. And interfaces with people on a day-to-day by giving like by improving their experiences with products. So for example, I don't know, like Wattpad, I was interviewing for the UX research role. Actually, I didn't get that role, and I think that you might actually be a better fit for it. Like, so I'm gonna like link you folks in an email after. But like they were, of course. I think it would really, and this is a side tangent, but I think it's really important. I think it helps to be really like actually curious about the product and what the research questions of the product, the primary kind of product strategy is, and be intrinsically motivated as an individual to understand the users better, you know. And so that's why I say Wattpad would be great, because you literally did your kind of like your master's on fanfic, and this is like a really big fanfic storytelling platform. So like you might actually have curiosities about the users, right? I mean, you did. You literally did. Yeah. That's why you did.
I did.
You
did. I did.
You know, so you already have research to share, like to the team. I'm curious, like for example, like for a company, and this is just an exercise, right? Like let's just go with it, like. So Wattpad is a storytelling platform, and a lot of people write fanfic on it. What would be some, let's say you were working as a user researcher, and you kind of know what user researchers do, like generally speaking, right? What would be some research directions that you would take on with Wattpad? Let's say, like to learn more about the users. I don't know. Very open question. I know it's a big one, but like it's like a brain teaser.
Exercise.
Right?
It's an exercise. It's a good exercise. I think one of the things that I personally, so I read an Archive of Your Own. So I did a lot of, which is another non-for-profit fan fiction website, and it's membership based. You actually have to get invited by someone else who is already an author or like has an account in Archive of Your Own, and then they will send you an invite, and then that's how you get to host. I would say one of the things that would have made my experience as a user better is if you can filter out side pairings. And what I will say about that is, for example, say you have a fan fiction that's centering A and B. That's the main pairing.
Okay.
But you don't want to read side pairings. You don't want to read a specific side pairing because you're like, I don't like this member. I don't like this person. Yeah. If you can filter out those side pairings, I bet you it like will make your life so much easier, because then you can just go straight exactly like, okay, I am looking for this specific pairing, and I don't want any other side pairings to be involved. I just wanted this pairing. And I also think one thing that will increase user friendliness is just having like a, I guess, deeper genre. Like there's just has to be a filtering system with tags where it's like, okay, maybe this is a fluff fan fiction. Fluff just means like it's very cutesy and like, very soft and whatnot. Or maybe something is rated R, something is rated like teen and rated. And I think that this makes it easier because you can the part of the reason why fan fiction is such a popular platform is because you curate your own experience in the fandom. You don't want to hang out with, these people. You don't have to. You just jump out of that, and then you find whoever is, attuned to your interest, and you get to curate your virtual experience. You can be whoever you want to be. You don't even have to tell people that, oh yeah, I live in Toronto, Canada, and my name is this. Like you can be a completely different person, and you can gain membership to different communities. And you curate your own experience, which is why I think with Wattpad and different kinds of fan fiction platforms, being able to have that choice and being like, okay, I really don't want to read this. I don't. Maybe something triggers you. Maybe like, oh, like I don't want to deal with stories that discuss about rape, or like I discuss about sexual abuse or whatever. So you can tag that out. I think it's very important hiring people who who are mindful of these tags, because you don't want to potentially give your users a very harmful experience. Like I remember there was a controversy a couple of years ago in the BTS, not the BTS fan fiction, but another fan fiction where like this author wrote a very explicit, like, very explicit fan fiction and did not tag it properly.
Right.
And so many readers got very triggered, and that can put you off completely from using the platform, because you want to be a platform that is very much like creating a safe space. Because why do people come to fan fiction in the first place? Because they don't see that representation in media. And so making sure that you're hiring people who are like combing through fan fiction, being like, okay, so this person forgot to tag, so I need to do that work myself. Also very important. I would say another thing, I'm kind of conflicted about this. Like, I would love other people's input on this, but I think it's healthy competition to have like, kind of like events being like, okay, so Wattpad or whoever is like, we want to have a competition of, fan fiction pairings of this from this like community or like this TV show or book or whatever. And then people submit their stories, and then you do,
that's good.
1, 2, 3, and then that will actually encourage other people to be like, oh yeah, by the way, like this fan fiction website is hosting this like competition. And also, I think as a fan fiction writer, when I was like writing it back in my days and just knowing the fan fiction community, people don't get paid for the amount of labor that they do. These stories are like 50 to 100K. Like, they're longer than some people's like PhD dissertation. And people pour out so much time, effort, and energy into these stories. So if there was some sort of monetary, like maybe Wattpad was giving out $100 or like $200, that would be great. These people are like, they barely get paid for anything. And I think, having maybe like asking sponsors to be like, hey, we're, we want to see the next generation's storytelling be through this thing. And I think another thing, I'm not sure if Wattpad actually does this because I'm not too familiar with the storytelling app as much, but Archive of Your Own actually spends, I think, a good like 50 to 100K hiring lawyers. So readers who are writing about real life people. Yeah, like they don't come for, like they don't get sued. Like, so
my friend's actually working in that department, working on the same problems. Yeah. So, but sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No. I just think that that's like a really exciting thing to do, because if your like users in your platform know that you have their back, they will more likely be using that. I think the reason why people love Archive of Your Own is because it's such a great app that is, first of all, non-for-profit, so it's free to join. And secondly, I think they collect donations throughout the year, but they have an amazing team of people who are lawyers who are just on hand. If any kind of legal issue comes by, they will be there to support you. And that's because I wrote my thesis on RPF, which means real person fan fiction, and it's about like BTS's Jungkook or like Jimin. And what if their manager is like, yo, we don't like that. We don't like this representation. And then Archive of Your Own lawyers will be like, actually, this is a work of like your fiction. Like this has nothing to do with real life. Like there's a whole set of bylaws that they've written about this fan fiction. And like, I think if users are aware of this and they're just very like transparent with like, okay, so these are the things that you can do, these are the things that you can't do, because I know there are certain fan fiction platforms that do not allow RPF because of this reason. And Archive of Your Own is like a very special place, because I think it's like you can literally write about anything. I don't think that there's like any restrictions on stuff.
Yeah, just as a small note, I think our Wattpad is like aimed towards a younger audience. That's why you might not like have been so as familiar of it. Archive of Your Own. Why don't you try doing research for? Are they hiring? They're probably hiring.
No, they're like a non-profit. They don't hire. They have everyone who works with them is volunteering. Actually, the person who founded Archive of Your Own is an anthropologist, and I did read her book, and she was like, "Yeah, we don't hire anyone."
Whoa.
Yeah.
Have you considered, I guess, like, just working with them, like in like a community contributor capacity? Like,
I mean, I would love to.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who to call. I think one of the biggest struggles that I've had is I find, like, I don't know if maybe this is like shade to your community, but like I find that like UX researchers and people who are in this community, it's like a very polarizing thing. Some people are very willing to help you, and they like. Do you know Idea Couture, the company?
Idea
Couture.
No, I don't.
Okay, so this is like a consultant company that's based in New York, I believe, and they have a location in Toronto. And I somehow got to speak to like a senior, like she used to be a senior ethnographer at the company. And she was like super helpful. She was like, yeah, let me like set a meeting. Like, how can I help you? And then there are people who you message and like they never get back to you.
Yeah.
So it's like a very polarizing thing where it's like, I find that sometimes you want to connect to people and like you're trying your hardest to be like, hey, hi, like I would like to work with you, or like, you know, have you hire me or something like that. But yeah, it's really hard to Networking is hard. I think academia honestly spoiled me a lot because so another like advantage of being in academia is this, where say like, you know, the queer COVID research team that I'm working on right now, the faculty lead started a new project and it's called Right to Risk. And she's like, yo, I really like your work in queer COVID Toronto. Do you want to go to the other research group that I'm doing? It's like a 2-year research project. Like, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, sure, no interview. I would love that. Sometimes I don't like the interview process, but that's the nature of academia, where it's like, if people know your work and like they know who you are, they will just give you these positions. But I'm sure that's the same case with UX and like UX research and design too, where it's like, if you know people and you know connections, people give you jobs.
Yeah. Basically, like my approach and I don't have a very, just to give some more context, I'm not like, I didn't come from a very traditional UXR background. Most, like I say, like 70-80% of folks in UXR have like an education.
Yeah.
So I don't have that. So the way that I kind of went in was, there's companies I like, let's say Archive of Your Own, right? I would literally like set up a workshop with the users and talk about, you know, feedback, or I would send them feedback directly, like all the feedback that you just mentioned. I would just send it to them directly, and that would be a way for me to like connect with them one-on-one individually. So for example, let's say for Wattpad, I just come up with Wattpad because we've just been talking about it. Yeah, like we would we can either send them feedback or we can start the conversation. Basically, kind of give some like value, and that helps start conversations. I found, I just personally found. So that's kind of how I've picked up UX contracts. It's always been, oh yeah, I actually really love this product. You know, I use it all the time, and I think it could be improved here. You know, and I'll ask my friends like, hey, how do you think it could be improved? And I'll make a video or I'll record it and I'll send it off, you know, to the founders. And then I'll just I get to skip the interview process and get hired on the spot, because it's, you know, it's someone in the community who cares, you know, who's like, you know, like, let's say,
Sorry to interrupt. Like, this is kind of ambitious, but like, I would say if I don't, so I'm going to heed this what I say next, as I'm not an environmental expert, but I'm someone who's just very conscious now. I'm just someone who's very conscious of like buying things and like consuming, because I went on this like weird purge during the pandemic where I was like, I need to be environmentally conscious, because too many climate documentaries, too many times, like, you know, scientists being like, yo, by 2030, you're not even going to see the coral reefs. And I'm like, this is kind of jarring. And so I went on this like extensive research where I just scoured all of the companies that I buy from usually, and like their labor practices and their sustainability approaches. And I was kind of shocked to see how not transparent they are. I mean, so to go back to your question about like what I feel about like the ethics of the company I work on, I feel heavily about it, because I don't want to work for a company that, you know, for example, like Zara is a company, and I don't mind saying this, but Zara contributes a lot to fast fashion. And
of course.
My background is that my parents are from Bangladesh, and so I've seen firsthand of these children basically going to garments factories and working all day in completely unsafe conditions and being paid in pennies. So I can't possibly put myself in like a situation where like I can justify that type of work, because I'm like, unless y'all like radically change your labor practices and pay people a livable wage, not necessarily a minimum wage, I just can't. But I do think that there are a lot of companies that are like that are being built now, like that are coming up, where people are very like transparent about like, oh, like, you know, we source local garments, or like we pay our workers like a livable wage according to this city or whatever not. So I think another thing that I would love for companies, any company really, especially tech companies, just be transparent of like where you're getting your stuff from. Like, are you getting it from Vietnam, you know, Cambodia and China and Bangladesh, where people are being basically killed in these factories, or are you actually doing something to contribute to like sustainability and like, you know, better consuming practices?
Yeah, and I think like that's going to be really important, like when you move from the academic world, or you know, kind of like do work with UX research, is you really get a chance to understand the company. Okay, is this even a product I want to work on? You know, most likely in UX research, it's going to be like a software product and not like clothing or apparel, or you know, other kind of directly environmentally degrading. But you know, the big questions for companies like Facebook, you know, like are you creating technology that like makes people depressed and raises rates of suicide? Like there's a lot of big questions that like
for sure
you would probably be better at asking than me of these tech companies, right? And so that's important. I think like that like when you find that company that really speaks to those questions, then it should be easy, like connecting with the team and like going through those interviews, and you know, like really interviewing the users and getting to know the community and doing that research is going to be really easy. I think the hardest part for me picking up contracts was just finding the right company. But once I did, like it was just like, oh, this is great. Like you're working on music that improves sleep for patients in hospitals. I want to work on that. That's a previous company I worked on. Yeah, like I want to work on that, you know. Empathetic AI companions to improve mental health. I want to work on that too.
Oh, you know? So, I love that. I love that project. That's great.
Yeah.
Mental health is like a up and coming, like I think I've been seeing a lot of like initiatives with mental health, which is great, because I think people, especially now that we're going into post-pandemic, like I interviewed this like therapist who was like, yeah, we're going to see this surge of people getting anxiety, depression, agoraphobia, like germophobia. And like, that would be I think now if anyone's thinking of like a startup, or like any companies thinking of like where should we invest mental health resources, it is the time now. Like seriously, I think within like a year or so, I think people are really going to be I guess like reeling through the trauma of being in COVID and like experiencing COVID in the pandemic, and then now having to kind of cope and like recover from that. So
yeah, like Maslow is a company you should check out, look into. Let me know if you want to connect with them and whatnot. Basically, they make apps to help people reflect through a mobile app to help people reflect on their day. And
oh, I love that.
Yeah, and they put like AI behind it, which is actually, to be honest, my opinion, it's like the first ethical application of AI that I've seen. Like you can see word clouds, you can see what you've been thinking about for the past, you know, like week, because you get to voice journal. Basically, it's an app that lets you voice journal, and you can type stuff in, and then it says, oh yeah, you've been thinking about this, you've been thinking about, I don't know, like sadness a lot recently. And then, you know, that's a good.
Oh, that's so nice. That's really nice.
Yeah. And it's like it's a cool, check it out. And it's also really great for the therapy community as well, because there's a function on it that allows coaches to kind of like see what's going on and see what's up as well. So I think it's really good. It's good for the mental health and therapy community, because Before this app, I personally found it like getting a good therapist was relatively difficult and inaccessible, and you couldn't, and the tools that are used aren't really great. Like, you have to set up, like, I recently started or trying to find a therapist myself, and it was
that's
really,
great.
like,
that's great.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, honestly, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
25.
25. Okay, so we're the same age. Toronto is a very interesting city where you can actually. So one of the things that I would suggest is, like, now that you're looking for therapy, maybe a great resource could be What's Up Walk-In, which is like a free service, and you just kind of book, like, it's like a very much like a walk-in type of thing. And I would suggest this just because if you find that, like, okay, like, I think therapy is something that I want to really look into, and, like, I want to invest in this, but it's taking you a longer time to find someone, I would highly suggest using this service because it's free, and you call them, and then within, I would say, even 30 minutes to 45 minutes, they will connect you with the therapist, and then you have like an hour session. And it's free, and you just,
no
like,
idea
if you
how
have
much this is gonna
something,
help me.
Please use it.
Totally.
I want people to use it, and, like, I want people to know that this is like a service that, like, people offer, and like, and it's really great if you are just, like, in between, kind of like, okay, I'm trying to find a therapist versus like, I just don't want to, like, not have no resource right now, and I have a lot of things to get off my chest. There's a person who will hear you out on this. And then a lot of the times, if you ask the therapist over there, like, specifically, like, hey, like, I'm kind of looking for resources, can you connect me to other people who are looking for new clients, they will be able to provide that. And then secondly, I would say, look for therapists who have a sliding scale. I mean, I'm personally, I think a sliding scale works for me because those people are more likely to work with you, and they'll be like, okay, let's do like a session. If you like me, then we can book another session. If not, no worries. Because people who have sliding scale are mostly, like, they'll understand, like, your socioeconomic situation, or, like, maybe you're like, hey, I kind of want to make sure it's the best fit for me. So I'm, can you offer a first session for either free or, like, a low budget, so that I can just test out the waters. So those are the two resources. I don't want anyone to be without mental health resources because it's very important, and it's great that you have taken this on. It's a very great step to take, for sure.
Thanks for the recommendation, because this is going to help out a lot, specifically because, number one, like, the resources that are covered with OHIP, they're like, they're super bare bone. They're basically just guides, like online guides, and reading, like, self-guided reading materials. No, I'm like, I don't want to talk to someone. And the people that you can talk to, like, they charge really high rates and whatnot. And so this is like a really good, okay, thanks. Really
and like,
I've been looking for the past month and a half, like.
And, like, let me know if you need any other help too. Like, I recently got connected with my therapist, and she was, like, very much sliding scale, and she's like, we're doing this, like, exchange where, like, I look at her like, CV and resume, and I'm, like, helping her edit it, and she's like, yeah, your next session is free. I'm like, great, we love exchange. I don't but like, some people might want to work with you on that one. And I think you can, as, like, a 25-year-old living in Toronto, where apparently it's, like, now one of the most expensive cities to live in, you can literally be like, I can't afford, like, full therapy rates, and you can be transparent about that, because I think finding affordable therapy is very hard, but it shouldn't be, like, it shouldn't be a life and death situation. Like, people should be able to offer that kind of service, and I know that there are many services out there, for sure.
Yeah, thanks for that. Definitely gonna check this out. Whew, this week.
Yeah,
sure, actually.
And let me know, like, how it goes, and if you need any more. I'm like, kind of like a research, like, Brittany likes to call me, like, a library. I love doing research I love doing research, period. Like, I will literally, this one time, like, I woke up, like, at 7:00, and then I just did research, and then Brittany's like, what did you do? And I'm like, here are all my research things that I did in the meantime. And she's also looking at UX design, I believe, like, in her company, she wants to do UX design. And I found, like, 3 websites where you can sign up for, like, mentors and mentees. I found, like, this girl who put like all of these UX research design. And she's like, how the fuck did you find this? I'm like, I just know.
If you two work together, it'd be like a power couple. Seriously, research design and research, they go together. They actually do. Like
they do. Yeah. So I do think my research skills are a gift. I can find the most cryptic thing on the internet. Like if you give me like 3 hours, I will find it.
Wow. I'm curious, like, now that's got me thinking like, oh, like what's something we can collab on? I don't know. That'd be cool.
I mean, if you want to collaborate, for sure, I would love to.
It could be like a good portfolio item or something like that.
I can help you with the academics, because I think you mentioned, honestly, I don't want academia to be like this thing that like, prevents people from getting the experience, because it's, at the end of the day, academia is a bunch of reading. It's a bunch of reading. It's a bunch of like, talking to profs. And if you need people who you want to talk to, if you need like access to articles, like I'm definitely that person, because I have membership to this institution who I do plan on, sucking off their resources, because they are U of T. They can afford it.
You should, and there's a lot of, on that note, there has been a lot of research I haven't been able to access that's like, through the library. So that would be, super helpful there.
Yeah.
Cool. So, don't want to take too much of your time there. I'm gonna connect you with the Wattpad team. Let's just.
I have a question though. Can I ask you one question? I had I prepared one question. Me and Brittany both collaborated on this question, so I'll give her credit. But she's like, like what skills do you think academic researchers have? Or sorry, what skills do you think academic researchers have to unlearn to be better at UX research? If you had to say.
Wow. Yeah. Really good question. Really good question from Brittany there. I would say to it's kind of like a mindset shift, because the academic world is, I found it's like you're going longer term with a project, like maybe you're working on a master's for 2 years, PhD for 4 years, right? Whereas product questions tend to change really quickly depending on like the community that you're working with, right? So, for example, maybe if I go into like that fan fiction research project you were mentioning, right? In the beginning, I had a research thesis that maybe people write fan fiction because they want to express XYZ, but in week 2, I find that it's actually might be XYQ, right? I have to kind of adjust myself there, and that might be a bit like, it might be a bit difficult, it might be not, but I think changing from academia to the professional research world involves switching hypotheses much more quickly, in my opinion, and that might be the only challenge. I think, though, on the other end, as someone from an academic background, you have access to many tools at your disposal that come really, really naturally to you, like stuff that you didn't even realize was a tool, but like in UX research, like we formalize and we think about a lot, like, I don't know, like field research or like diary studies or like primary reading, like stuff like that. And you're like, okay, well, obviously that's what you would do, right? It comes really intuitively. So that I guess those are the skills that would convert well. Yeah. I guess a really good like follow-up conversation might be like, what types of things you did in the academic research world that we feel would convert really easily to the UX research world. And I think that's a collaborative question. But I think like off the top, like research design is something that you'll come in that is really important, and the academic world brings in really well, because I imagine with every paper you write, research design is important, and thinking about how you can conduct the research is important. Yeah, can you share a little bit about that, like what research design is to you or means to you? Because for me, it's something that I'm just slowly learning about and like Googling myself, and I have no idea. So, yeah, like what did that look like for your, yeah.
I think, actually got like inspired by the second project that I'm working on, Right to Risk. It hasn't started yet, but I also am learning about research design slowly. But I think it has to do with sort of like how you're conducting and getting data in the first place. And I think what's important is to make sure whoever your participants are, like say you're starting research for a product, and you're like, okay, this is geared towards like 13 to 18-year-old women, or like female girls. And I think when you're conducting interviews, when you're working with them, it should feel collaborative, because I find that one of the things that I kind of personally learned from academia and like being in anthropology is that like a lot of people, like you go into this community, right? And you're doing research and you're like, okay, we have this really amazing question that we want to find out. You like share your life story. And if these people are sharing their life story and they're sharing their time and energy, it should feel like they're getting something out of it. And I think that's the key to appealing to different users, because if they feel like, oh, I got something out of this research, then they're probably going to be more likely to be like, yeah, this product might be for me. This product might actually work out, because I think it's important to make participants feel from the beginning or the get-go, or like however early as possible, to be like, no, we want to design this product specifically for you. We are learning from you as much as you are learning from us. Like what kind of positive experience can we give them? Whether that be like, oh, one of the things that we are doing for the Right to Risk is that we are planning this kind of research methodology where participants are going to be using a digital calendar to mark out like their romantic and sexual encounters, relationships, whatever. And the hope is they'll do this for like a year or 2 years. And then at the end, researchers are going to get together, and then we're going to see like what patterns. But the hope is that the participants themselves notice patterns. And they're like, oh, okay, like, maybe this makes a lot of sense as to why like I went into this relationship, or maybe this was toxic, or like maybe whatever it may be. And the whole point of this research, I think it was like a sociologist who came up with this method, was that you are just not like this like very extractive research.
I got a note on that. Yeah.
Taking away stuff and then not giving anything back. I mean, like
a lot of research in UX research right now, which I don't agree with, but this is like the more traditional companies. What they'll do is just like, yeah, here's if you, first of all, some companies don't even offer anything. They just spam you with emails asking for survey feedback, right? Yeah. So that's the absolute like bottom of the barrel stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
You got that out of the way. Then you got some companies that are a bit better, they're like, oh yeah, we'll give you a $25 Amazon gift card. It's just like, okay, sure, great. Like that's great. But then I think the next kind of like level of companies and organizations and people that we want to be working with, to your point, would be people. And let me add to this too, if you feel, are companies that where you, as a participant, you're contributing to the research, but it helps you transform as a person. Like, for example, in that project there, when people were reviewing the calendar to look at like, their romantic sexual encounters, they're like, okay, so that's interesting. This is, I didn't know that I'm the type of person who does X and Y and Z, so exactly. They're actually learning about themselves too. And that's something that's like value, or, that's something that's maybe less, or not like, preferably not extractive at all.
And less superficial, like, more than like a $25 Amazon gift card. I mean, like monetary expenses should be given. We're paying for Queer COVID, we're paying about $50, I think, like per person for their interview. And they also did the survey as well. But it's like, yes, we can pay you, but to me, it's just so superficial. It's like, okay, like, your job is done. Goodbye. You're never going to hear us from again. Like, why not have a collaborative relationship and be like, okay, you know what? Once we have like the data, minimum. We are willing to share with you. Like,
it's the bare, like that whatever.
It's the bare minimum.
Exactly. The monetary side is like the bare minimum. I'd agree with that. And then this is a great conversation, I feel like, because it's it's a big one, like incentives in the research community. And like ultimately, I want your thoughts on this, but like, where do you think incentives should go in the future? Let's say 10, 20 years, like what should the ideal participant experience between the a researcher and a community member, like what does it involve and what do people get out of it? You know, like what is that like? Open question, super open question, like super open question.
No, I think it's a good question. I think, you know what? I think participants should feel like their life experiences and the work that they're doing for these surveys or whatever feels it's a job. It's a project. You are contributing your life experience. You are contributing your skills, your emotions, energy, whatever is required of you. It is like people should be felt as like this is valuable. This is, you know, like you. Because why are you designing the product? You want people to buy your product. You want people to use your product. And so if the research methodology itself doesn't feel like you have like the customer's back, or you have like their intentions and like their well-being as a priority, then like what's the point of doing this research? What's the point of, you know, getting feedback from people? So it should feel like you are welcoming this person and being like, you know what, like, do you have any concerns? Do you have, you know, any feedback? And it's like, why not go beyond like the survey questions or the interview questions and be like, yeah, like what else have you thought about? Like, is there another product that comes to mind when you are answering this question? And like, what do they offer that makes you feel better? Because I think now one of the biggest issues when it comes to like humans is just like not being able to connect with people and like feeling burnt out and just feeling like overwhelmed. And so how can you make a user experience where people feel connected with one another despite whatever product you're using? Like, and I know this is like a very emotional kind of thing, but I think if you can make a product feel like it is personally built for you and it has your back, that is the best product. I'm thinking about like, you know, your company, the company that you mentioned, Maslow, where it's like they really want to kind of what's the word, like emphasize on empathy and like, you know, having someone be sensitive to someone's emotions and their mental health and their well-being. Like that makes me feel like I'm taken care of as a customer. Like how can you make someone feel taken care of, you know, like with a product and or a software or an app or something like that, where people are able to be like, yeah, maybe this is, you know, this is actually not exploitative, or like it's not taking advantage of me as a user. It's actually giving me what I'm paying for, and like not like, you know, like sneakily putting something under there so that like it makes me feel like I'm being cheated on or like I'm being exploited. Like I think that's the biggest important thing, because now I feel like our generation is so aware of capitalism and like so aware of like all of these companies and institutions just like exploiting the hell out of people. How can you move on from that? How can you get people to purchase things and actually invest in softwares when I find that a lot of people are being like, yeah, maybe I don't want to purchase and I don't want to buy from Amazon. I don't want to buy from like these companies because they're not treating workers fairly. So like having good value is also important. Like just like putting the customer first. And I feel like with products and software, even though a lot of people are like, we put the customer first, I don't think they do. I think that people put themselves first before the customer. I think it's, you know, exploitative and gross sometimes when I'm just like, just use a product. Like, okay, the other day, I was, this is really funny, but you know, the Toronto bikes?
Yeah. Bike share?
Yeah, bike share.
Yeah.
I paid $7 because I was like, okay, 30 minutes is $3.50 or whatever. I'm gonna bike for an hour. And then I'm like going through my bank statements, and then it's like $7 I paid, and then they charged me for $4.50. And I was like, why? And then I called them. I'm like, why did you charge me for $4.50? And they're like, oh, did you not read like the fine print where it's a bike sharing app? So basically you have to, like, you get the bike for 24 hours, but you can only use one bike for 30 minutes, and then you park it, and then you exchange another bike. I'm like, how horrible of a user experience is this? Yo, how am I gonna find like, how am I gonna enjoy my bike ride and then find a place to park it and then get another bike? Like that was terrible. I was like, this is the worst. Like I was like,
funny enough, that literally the same thing happened to me. And wow, like that. Yes, they need to change that. They need to change that.
I'm like, you just lost a customer. I'm never using that app again. I'd rather buy a bike myself because, and like Brittany was there too, and she's like, what the fuck? Why is this? Like, why are they scamming off like money from people? I'm like, honestly, like make this like More
At least,
transparent.
yeah, exactly. At the least, make it like louder and clearer, right? At the least, if it was okay for whatever reason, if you need to repark, like at least make it clear. And so, yeah, like it
And give
was.
people more than 30 minutes. Like like I remember when I was returning the bike, like I went to my original location and it was completely filled because when I started biking, it was like, there was like 3 or 4 spots, but then when I got there, like I guess the spots were already taken. And then I had to go somewhere else, like, and bike for 15 more minutes to park the thing. So I'm like, imagine you're just trying to enjoy the weather and your bike ride, and then you're like, shit, I gotta go and park the bike before
I got 2 minutes
30
left
minutes.
before I get charged. Yeah.
I was like, this is terrible. This is terrible. This is a terrible design. Whoever designed this, I'm sorry.
Whew. Anyways, I'm like brain farting right now. I'm getting so like
No worries, no worries.
mentally. Why don't we do this again like next week? Like just chat. We can
Yeah.
like,
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I can learn from you. You can learn from me, type of thing. Yeah, I'm gonna hop off. I'm gonna connect you with Wattpad and Maslow. I'm just trying to find like a good angle to connect
Yeah.
with, because I want it to be like, like once you have a conversation, it's easy
Thank you.
for you. Wattpad, let me see. I'm just thinking out loud here, so don't mind me. Let's see, Wattpad. So I can connect you and the hiring manager or the HR person. I'll just be like, yeah, I just had a conversation with you, and you did your research in fan fiction. Yeah, I thought it'd be cool to connect. The position's still open, and yeah, Maslow. Why don't we play around with their app next week or something like that? And
Yeah.
get some of your thoughts on it.
I'll do a little bit more research and like get myself familiarized with that. Yeah. Sounds good.
Coolio. Yeah, was that helpful? I hope that was helpful.
That was really helpful. I haven't met new people in a very long time. Like the only person I'm hanging out with is Brittany throughout the pandemic, which is nice. She's great, but I'm seeing her all the time. I'm like, I want to see new people. I want to meet new people. So this is great. I mean, aside from like career goals and whatnot, it's
got you on that. Got you on that. And
Thank
you got me on like learning about academic research and whatnot. So yeah.
Thank you. And like, if you have any questions, like, please let me know. Like, if something comes up to you, like, you can just. I think you gave me your number, so just feel free to text me, and then I will just hop on. And like, if you need an article, if you need like any kind of research guidelines, papers, if you want to read my papers, let me know.